In the name of the Right Honourable Chris Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, does he stand by all of his government statements and actions?
Yes, and especially our action in recent days to make it easier for New Zealanders to see a doctor, Mr Speaker. We know that too many Kiwis wait too long to see their GP, which is why we're putting more funding into primary health care. And thanks to that funding, Kiwis will see more nurses working in primary care, more international doctors working in their community, more opportunities to enrol with their local doctors, and more choice with the rollout of a 24/7 digital service. Fixing the healthcare system won't be easy, but our outstanding Minister of Health is backing patients and making sure we can get them the care they need. He's funding more, he's growing the workforce more, and he's getting rid of the bureaucracy.
Supplementary question. Why has he expressed confidence in David Seymour's ability to clean up the mess he's made of the school lunches program, given his own Minister of Education has refused to share that confidence?
Well, David Seymour is the accountable minister. I've got every confidence he's all over the detail and he's going to make sure all the food and the meals get up to scratch.
Supplementary question. Was Erica Stanford correct that David Seymour's announcement cancelling teacher-only days overstepped the mark? If so, what has he as Prime Minister done about it?
Well, I have clear delegations and clear responsibilities. David Seymour is the accountable minister for school lunches. He is aware of the issues and he will fix them. Erica Stanford is the accountable minister for teacher-only days, and she will manage that.
So weak.
Why is Erica Stanford being left to clean up David Seymour's messes while he fails to show up to meetings with her, and as he as PM won't do anything about it?
Sorry, can you explain which meetings?
Mr Speaker, I don't believe I need to explain questions, but the Prime Minister might like to read the news.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Just do we move on to question 2 then, if that's where we're at?
Oh, point of order, Mr Speaker. Well, I've asked the Prime Minister a question.
Yes, you did, and then you decided to qualify it when he gave an answer that was unacceptable. I'm asking you now to ask the question again and nothing else.
Okay. I'll repeat the question. Why is Erica Stanford being left to clean up David Seymour's messes while he fails to show up to meetings with her? And why will he, as Prime Minister, not do anything about that?
Well, as I said before, I have every confidence that David Seymour is working his way through the issues around the school lunches. He's aware of the detail, he's on top of it, and I have every confidence that he will sort it out.
A supplementary question, Mr Speaker. Why does Erica Stanford have the fortitude to repeatedly stand up to David Seymour that he seems to lack?
As I said, David Seymour
the last part of that question is not in order. Next up.
The question. Is it still his expectation that the new, cheaper, mass-produced school lunches will be at least as good, if not better, than the healthy, locally made lunches his government cancelled? If so, when can hungry school students expect him to deliver on that promise?
Well, I'll just say to that member, it's a bit rich because we saved school lunches because that Prime Minister didn't fund school lunches. So we are spending more on school lunches and we are giving them to more kids. That's a good thing.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Just when the House comes to a little bit of quiet.
If it hasn't taken feeding children melted plastic, failing to deliver lunches at all, serving up the same food 13 days in a row, or serving pork to Halal students, what will it take for him to finally step in and sort out the mess that his government has made of the school lunches program?
Why is he laughing?
Look, again, I'll just say to that member, this is a government that has actually put together a school lunch program that is feeding more children and is funded. He hadn't funded it, we funded it, we're expanding the access to it. Yes, some of the food is not up to scratch, but the Minister is working his way through the issues and I have every confidence he will resolve it. And I just say to parents that may be listening to this, feel free to prepare a Marmite sandwich and an apple for lunch.
That is